Hello, everybody. It is Wednesday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Actually, it's Tuesday. We're recording this on Tuesday because Chris Carter has to get on a plane to Ireland for the big Steelers versus Minnesota Vikings game at Croke Park in Dublin. So we are here for the Wednesday edition of the North Shore Drive podcast, nevertheless, presented by FanDuel. We're excited to dig into some of Chris's grades from the game against the Patriots, talk about what they mean moving forward. We're also going to look around the AFC North, where the Steelers are now alone in first place, believe it or not, despite their flaws. They're atop the standings of the division. So we're going to break down the early division race. Before we do, we want to thank a sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's Edgar, Snyder and Associates. When you've been hurt on the job, who decides when you're better? Who decides when your treatment is over? Who decides when your benefits are over? The answer might surprise you. It's insurance company doctors. How does that make you feel? If the answer is not great, call Edgar, Snyder and Associates today at 1-800-94-EDGAR. They'll fight for the work comp rights you deserve. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Chris, you did your weekly grades post on postgazette.com. Everyone should go over to the website, check that out in written form, because you're going to get a lot more than we're able to talk about in 10 minutes here. But I wanted to pull out some of the highlights and get your thoughts on them. The big thing that stood out to me was a really bad grade for Payton Wilson. That's been, I think, a pretty across the board opinion of his early play. This, despite the fact that he is one of the bigger fan favorites, a guy that a lot of people have invested a lot in. He's just not been that guy early on, especially in coverage, despite bragging, I think, during training camp that he thought he was the best coverage linebacker in the NFL. He certainly hasn't been that. He certainly hasn't been close. So what did you see from Payton Wilson against New England, and what have you seen from him generally this season that's prevented him from living up to those expectations?
Well, I got to talk to him Monday in the Steelers locker room, and one thing he acknowledged was that, you know, they're still getting things together because this is a different defense than last year, and I think that's something that I keep combating against whenever I talk to Steelers fans, and they're like, "Oh, it's just the same stuff as last year. Nothing's changed. They're not doing anything different." And they're doing a lot of things different. They're blitzing from different angles. They're sending different heat. They're sending different twists. They're sending different pressures. They're moving TJ Watt around more. Like they're doing a lot of different things, and they're also disguising a lot of different things in different ways. And I think that's where something that guys like Payton Wilson are still adapting to. Payton Wilson is a second-year linebacker, and I think that that's the thing, is that people forget that this is a guy who is still growing. Listen, like, I'm going to grade him honestly when I do these grades, but at the same time, I'm not dooming him to saying this is what he'll always be. I'm just being honest that, hey, they need him to be a lot better. That's the second touchdown pass that they allowed that ended up tying the game. That was on him, and I talked to him about it, and he talked about, hey, like, you know, part of it is they were in a position where they were trying to show man coverage, but they were in zone coverage, and you need to drop, when you're doing that, you need to drop into your spot a lot more aggressively, and sometimes you just don't do that right away. And so, I think that that's something that he's still getting used to in that. I think for Payton Wilson, he's a guy that he just, when he lines up in man coverage with somebody and he knows he can run with him, that's when he is at his best. But when you're having to think about, okay, I'm disguising this over here, and I'm trying to make it look like I'm going to do this here, but I have to get to this over there to be part of the defense, that sometimes that thinking can get past you when the game is moving so fast. And that's not just a Steelers thing. That happens everywhere, especially to younger players, and especially in the NFL. But I think that's where his biggest mistakes come. I think that he can clean them up. I also think that this defense is a lot closer to putting together some really good things than people realize. Granted, they just put together a 5-turnover game with a turnover on down, so they put together a pretty good game on Sunday. But that was my problem with Payton Wilson.
Do you still think he has a high ceiling, Chris? Do you think he can live up to the expectations a lot of people have built for him?
Yeah, and I mean, like, look, there's always people that are just gonna build up ridiculous towers of, oh, he's the greatest linebacker of all time. Like I'm not saying all that, but he has a ton of potential. I mean, this guy, I've seen this guy make very smart plays at NC State. He made smart plays last year. He is, again, he's a second-year player. He still has a great build. I think one thing that's really on his side right now is that, the biggest question about him coming out of college was, could he stay healthy? And healthy has not been the issue for him. It's been, just learning how to play in these different defense that's being a lot more aggressive and disguising a lot more things. And that's where I think he can get to. And again, I don't think he's I don't think he's not a smart player. I think he's just making mistakes here and there, and that happens. And there's some of the guys on the defense that are veterans that are making those mistakes. So I absolutely think he can get there. It's going to take time. It's going to take some learning, but hey, it took time and learning for a lot of guys. Like, Troy Polamalu in his early years made a lot of mistakes and was getting caught out of position because he was an aggressive player and he wanted to do aggressive things. And there were sometimes he got beat because of that, but eventually he learned how to get better because of that. And I'm not saying Payton Wilson is Troy Polamalu, but I'm saying I don't judge players and doom them to being terrible after just one season and 3 games.
Chris, conversely, Cole Holcomb played a lot in this game at middle linebacker. I guess it depends. Do you think Payton Wilson was benched because he didn't play as much as Cole Holcomb? Was it matchup dependent, as Holcomb was suggesting after the game? Regardless, we saw a lot more of Cole Holcomb than we did of Payton Wilson. What are you seeing from him, and why did you like his play in this game?
I think that the reason he got benched is because Payton Wilson was making a lot of mistakes. This was the 3rd straight game where I thought Payton Wilson did not play well at all. So I think that when they started the game, they put Cole Holcomb in because he was going to be better against the run. They needed a guy to be able to attack the hole, be in the right run fits. And Cole Holcomb did that for the most part. He forced a fumble to start the game, and that was pretty big. The biggest mistake Cole Holcomb made was that he just on that 4th and 1 where the Steelers could have stopped the Patriots inside their own red zone and given the offense a short field while up 14-7, I think it was. Cole Holcomb is in the right spot. They have the exact right defense. They have this play figured out. Holcomb just completely whiffs on the tackle and gives up the first down. If he makes that play right there, I think Cole Holcomb, I'd probably give him like a 2-star grade on the day. But still, he's not a coverage linebacker. He got beat in some spots. But when it came to helping against the run, he did that. He forced his tackle. He forced his fumble. So I give Cole Holcomb credit for that. But I think that still the ideal situation for the Steelers is having Patrick Queen and Payton Wilson on the field at the same time, going sideline to sideline, covering tight ends and players over the middle, dropping into zone coverages while also being aggressive and blitzing the quarterback. Because to me, I think this defense is at its best when it's forcing 3rd and longs, and then Payton Wilson and or Patrick Queen can be part of a blitz package that involves TJ Watt, Cam Heyward, Derek Harmon, and Alex Highsmith and or Nick Herbig. So I think when you do that kind of stuff, they're going to win a lot more pressures. And I also think that you saw those pressures come together for those 5 sacks that they got Sunday.
Chris, Keeanu Benton was another guy who stood out in a bad way to you. This with TJ Watt and Cam Heyward applying pressure to the quarterback, applying pressure to the Patriots, generally speaking. This with Derek Harmon in there, I think we had a lot of question. Now, granted, Derek Harmon was on a pitch count, but still, Derek Harmon was in the game, and Keeanu Benton still struggled. It seems like he's sort of running out of excuses, at least from the outside, in terms of his play early on. What did you see against New England? And generally speaking, why is he struggling? And is it correctable? Are some of these issues similar to what you were saying with Payton Wilson, that you still have hope for him, or is he trending in toward regression territory here?
I mean, right now he's trending in regression territory, but I still think that there's a chance that this is because of some sort of elbow injury. He's had this elbow pad on, since the end of training camp when he missed a few days and then came back, and they didn't say why. But you often see him grabbing his elbow after plays. I think something's going on there because these weren't problems that Keeanu Benton had last year, and he was really good at using his hands to at least not be as much of a liability in the run game as he is this year. And that's something that has to change. And unfortunately for him, I think that's continuing. Now, I will say this game, he was better than the last 2 games, but granted, that's because I gave him the lowest grade I could the last 2 games. But this week, he at least it was a part of the pressure that the Steelers were putting together. He didn't register an official pressure, but there were times where he was beating his guy up the middle, and at least it helped in the general scheme of getting other people chances to get after Drake May. And so he doesn't get 3 skulls, but he did get 2 skulls this week. I just think that he like Payton Wilson can be a lot better. that they have so much potential. And maybe some of it is he needs to get healthy. Maybe he's playing hurt, and part of it was they're shorthanded, so that they can't afford to rest him much. Well, with Derek Harmon back, maybe that'll change. I will say I thought Ekuale played pretty good up the middle for the Steelers, and he was a good factor. I gave him his first star of the season, and I wouldn't be shocked if this week you saw against the Vikings Cam Heyward, Derek Harmon at the DN positions, Ekuale at the nose tackle position, while you put Benton on the second line, maybe with like Y.A. Black and Logan Lee. We'll see how they deploy that though.
I'm interested to monitor all that. Couple of positives that stood out to me from your grades post. You did mention Ekuale there. Jabrill Peppers was on your list of guys who made solid contributions. Broderick Jones, notably. I mean, he struggled in the first couple of games, but you liked what you saw against New England. Do you want to touch any more on what you saw from those guys and why you were encouraged?
Oh, Broderick Jones, I thought that he was okay against the pass rush. He didn't give up a sack. Granted, they also were like throwing passes very quickly because they were trying to not put this offensive line in too bad of a situation against the defense that had the most sacks in the NFL going into this week. But him and the offensive line mostly get points for doing that well. But I think that the really encouraging sign that could come out for the Steelers if they continue to do this is you look at the grades that I give, and there's a lot of really good grades from backups, and that's something the Steelers really need this season is guys to emerge along down the depth chart. It was Nick Herbig's first 2-star grade of the season. Brandon Eccles got a 2-star grade. When you look at how he was playing, he had the interception in the red zone. He also had the stop on the fourth down, and then you get other guys filling in. Kenneth Gainwell being a good playmaker at the running back position behind Jalen Warren, Cole Holcomb, but being a starter after being on the bench to start the season, making plays. Ekuale coming off the bench and making plays. Derek Harmon technically coming off the bench and making plays. So really good stuff from those guys. And then of course Jabrill Peppers, like you said, guys are starting to fill in, understand what their roles are. They're starting to mesh a bit more on both sides of the ball. The Steelers just need to keep that moving forward. This was always going to be like this. Again, this is a brand new defense, despite being the same defensive coordinator. And that was something I actually talked to several players about in the locker room on Monday, was that I was like, there's a lot of people alleging this is the same defense. Like, it's not, man. We're doing so many different things, and that's kind of why we're in a learning process right now. So I think that's the encouraging thing, is that you got guys filling in and making plays. They just need to gel a bit more, and it's taking time to do that. But hey, I talked to Darius Slay last Wednesday in the Steelers locker room, and he was like, "Hey man, I was on a Super Bowl championship team last year. We started 2-2. We had a lot of things that we needed to gel last year with a new defensive coordinator. It takes time. So we're working on things. So I think that another cool thing for the positives on the grades was just that the depth. There was a lot of depth guys that came through.
Chris, we're going to talk about the AFC North race on the other side, but appreciate your insight on what we saw last week. We'll take a quick break and be right back. We are back on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm Adam Bittner. He's Christopher Carter. We're going to be talking about the AFC North after the Steelers assumed first place with the Ravens' loss to the Lions on Monday Night Football. Before we do, we want to thank a couple of sponsors. First, we got ZipRecruiter. Are you having trouble finding the right people to hire? Tired of sorting through endless resumes? Well, the future of hiring looks much brighter because ZipRecruiter's latest tools and features help speed up finding the right people for your roles, so you save valuable time. And now you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/audio. With ZipRecruiter's new advances, you can easily find and connect with qualified candidates in minutes. See a candidate you're really interested in? You can unlock their contact info instantly. Use ZipRecruiter and save time hiring. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. And if you go to ZipRecruiter.com/audio right now, you can try it for free. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/audio. ZipRecruiter is the smartest way to hire. We also want to thank Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci, Pittsburgh's mesothelioma and asbestos attorneys with over 85 years of experience. Call them now for a free consultation or visit sdklaw.com. Chris, the Ravens lose Monday night. Everyone in the division except the Steelers is 1-2. Steelers are 2-1. The Ravens are still the favorites according to our friends at FanDuel. They are at -320 to win the division. The Steelers are still plus 550 underdogs. The Ravens' schedule has obviously been tougher. They draw the Bills, and the Lions within the first 3 games here, and they lose both of those games. But it's also true, isn't it, Chris, that that's what we criticize the Steelers for, is that they don't beat these good teams. They don't go out and win. You include the Ravens playoff loss. They've lost 3 out of 4 to teams of that caliber. So are the Ravens maybe closer to the Steelers than they are to those other teams that we've seen them face the last couple of weeks?
I just think it's a little early in the season to doom anybody. I think that they've had some really good opponents early on. I still think the Ravens are again one of my Super Bowl favorites this year. I picked them and the Packers to make it all the way. And look, the Packers were looking unstoppable through 2 weeks, and then he just have a dud against the Browns. Those type of things happen. I do think it's a bit concerning for the Ravens that the defense is giving up as many points as they are. Like, you look at what they've been doing so far this season. I came into this season thinking like, hey, with the pieces that they have and all that, they can move all over the place. They should be one of the more dominant defenses in the NFL. And I know a lot of people get on the Steelers defense for not living up to the creed right now, but the Ravens are giving up the second most points in the NFL right now, and that's alarming. If I'm the Ravens, even though they played some of the best teams, they need to be better. They have to be sharper. They could be a little bit closer to the Steelers. Now, I think the biggest thing that could work out for the Steelers is, I told everybody them Bengals was not who they said they was, and they are exactly what I was thinking. And I'm not saying that to make fun of Joe Burrow being injured, but I said at the beginning of the season, all going into this season, that man dodged way too many sacks last year. He worked some miracles to keep himself clean. This offensive line needed to step up. They didn't do enough to invest in it. Lo and behold, he suffers his third, what's basically a season-ending injury. He might be able to make it back for late December, but the way they looked, they literally had the worst loss in franchise history against the Vikings last week. I wouldn't be shocked if this team is out of the playoff race by like mid to late November. So I think the encouraging thing for the Steelers in the AFC North is it should be a 2-team race now, whereas the Bengals, I had said, okay, if they can get hot and Joe Burrow does stay healthy, they could be a problem. But lo and behold, that's not going to be a thing. I think the biggest thing is the Steelers need to be able to take advantage of games where they should be able to take teams out. And I do think the Steelers still have a chance to win the division. It's an outside chance. They still need to do a lot of things. But like, if they go into this London game and they find a way to beat the Vikings, going 3-1 to start the season, then they got games coming out of this versus the Browns at the Bengals. That's a legitimate chance to go 6-1 to start the season, and give yourself grace to maybe lose a game to the Packers or the Chargers in the middle part of the season, and then eventually you get to that just run of really tough teams of the Bills, the Ravens, and the Lions 3 times in 4 weeks, and then you get kind of what the Ravens are going through now. But the AFC North is not completely out of reach for the Steelers, but I still have the Ravens as the heavy favorites to win this division. I still think the sweet spot for the Steelers is try to get to 11 wins and let that get you into the playoffs, where there you can be like, okay, now we're going to be able to get like a decent 5 seed. We'll play the worst division winner instead of, an MVP level quarterback coming out the gate the way they have the last 3 times they've been in the playoffs.
Well, and I think just the way the Ravens have played in the first couple of games makes you wonder, are they just going to have to be the giant that the Steelers team is going to have to slay, because they might not be as good as some of those other division winners, or with those 2 early losses, maybe they are good by the end of the season, but they have to deal with that in the seedings come the end of the season. Chris, how bad do you think the Bengals were versus how good do you think the Vikings were in that game? I think it's interesting because the Steelers obviously have to play both in the next couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. They face Minnesota this week. Were you impressed? Were you more impressed by Minnesota, or were you more down on Cincinnati and what they look like without Joe Burrow? Are they just a bad team without him, flat out, beyond what they have going on in the quarterback situation?
The way I saw it is it was really a really bad game for the Bengals. But when one team plays bad, if you capitalize on it for big plays, you're playing really well, and that's what the Vikings did last week. They played very well against the Bengals. They took them out, and look, the Bengals were 2-0 going into that game. They barely beat the Browns in week 1. They barely beat the Jaguars in week 2, but then they got slaughtered. And then you look at the Bengals schedule coming up. They got at the Denver Broncos. They got the Lions at home, at the Packers, and then they play the Steelers. I would not be shocked if this turns into a 5-game losing streak for the Bengals. Now, the one thing that plays for the Bengals' favor is that game against the Steelers is at home on a Thursday night as the Steelers are coming off of playing a division game. And the Steelers under Mike Tomlin, and I think ever actually, because since the start of Thursday Night Football, I don't think they've ever won a game playing a division opponent on the road on Thursday night, coming off of playing another division opponent. Like, it's just a curse that they have, and that could be the thing that keeps the Bengals in that one. But I just this Bengals team was built on the three-headed monster of Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. And even if all those guys were healthy, they needed to overcome what was going to be one of the worst defenses in the NFL, one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL, and I just didn't see that happening. But again, like you look across the division, the Ravens don't have it easier either. Like they're 1-2 right now. They have to play the Chiefs in Kansas City this weekend. That's not going to be easy. The Chiefs aren't playing great football right now, but Patrick Mahomes is going to give you a hard time. Then they go back home to a 0-3 Texans team that I'm shocked is 0-3 to start the season. Maybe they can get one there, but then they play the Rams after that, and the Rams are another really good football team this year. So they have some tough games themselves. But again, you look at the Steelers' schedule and you say, like, man, if you can handle your business and get to the Packers with 5, if you get to 6 wins with the Packers, that's amazing. But if you can have 5 wins going into the Packers game, you kind of give yourself a lot of extra space to have a flub or two against some of these really good teams on their schedule. And I also say the Colts are no slouches right now. They look really good at 3-0. So I still think division's in sight, and this could still be a really good back and forth year in the AFC North between the Steelers and the Ravens. But they both have some serious challenges coming up really soon.
How much credit do you give the Browns for that win against Green Bay? Are they still you said this is a 2-team race. And I would tend to agree. I don't think the Browns are going to win the division. But could they be a team that poses problems to the Steelers like they did last year? We remember that. That was a Thursday night game, like we were talking about. Steelers go up there in the snow and drop one that they probably wish they had in hindsight. So are the Browns still some level of dangerous to the Steelers? Maybe more so than in the division overall?
I think they aren't a threat to win the division, but they are a threat to upset the Steelers when they play, especially in Cleveland. I was trying to think of it. I can't think of the last time the Steelers won in Cleveland. Actually, I think it was 2021 when they swept them. That's the last time that they've swept the Browns. But they haven't swept the Browns that often in recent years, and part of it's because they've just been a stingy defense that when they get at home, they can be tough. Even when the Browns have been good, they're a lot better at home than they are away. And that's going to be a problem for the Steelers, at all times. That's what the Packers ran into, I think, is that they can be really tough there. But I just think eventually when the season plays out and they get to play, they're at the Lions this week. They're going to be playing the Vikings the week after that. They're at Pittsburgh after that. They get the Dolphins and they're at the Patriots. I think by like mid-November, they're going to have played themselves into probably 6 or 7 losses, and they won't be in a position to really be in the playoff hunt. But they can always be that thorn in the Steelers' side. And this time they play the Steelers in Cleveland in the second to last week of the season. So if they're out of the playoff picture by then, they could just be wanting to play spoiler as the Steelers are fighting to either win the division or be in the playoffs. So they certainly can be a threat to that. They have been, whether they've been a good or bad team for the Steelers. It's part of a rivalry game in the AFC North, but I think that we're eventually going to see them fall off from any potential division talks. Like, granted, I don't think they're really in them right now.
Chris, you've been using the Green Bay game as kind of the bellwether for where the Steelers will be. I want to maybe widen the aperture a little bit and look toward, when they get into that meat grinder late in the season with Baltimore, Buffalo, Detroit. I believe they have 8 games before they get there against the Vikings, Browns, Bengals, Packers, Colts, Chargers, Bengals again, and the Bears. What do you think they need to do in those 8 games to maintain this edge they have and stay in that race before they play those probably division deciding games against Baltimore late in the year?
So they have 8 games. They're 2-1. I think they need to start this. They need to go through this stretch winning at least 5 of those games, and that would put them at what, 7-4, and then
I think 7-4. You're right.
Yeah. So if you're 7-4 going into late November, then if you can split with the Ravens and if you can beat the Dolphins and you can split a game between the Lions and the Bills, that'll get you 10 wins. And then if you can beat the Browns in Cleveland, that gets you 11. So I think 7, the key is to total up to 7 wins before you start that stretch against the Bills. And again, this team's growing. They have a lot of young pieces on it. They're still figuring things out. The offensive line's growing together. I think that they've gotten better each game, granted marginally, but they've gotten better. I think the pass rush is figuring things out. I also think this team has a lot of new veterans, and that's playing into why they're being more aggressive. They're doing different things, but they're taking time to figure out how to do those aggressive things while not giving up certain plays. So if the Steelers can trend positively throughout the season and keep growing and take steps forward and also stay healthy, it's another big part of every NFL team season, not just the Steelers. Go look at what the Niners are going through injury-wise, and it is rough. But I think that if they can do those things, they can put themselves in a situation where they are good. Because again, they were in position to be contenders last year. They were 10-3 at one point, and they fell off a cliff. I think if they could just avoid falling off that cliff at the end of the season, this could be a Steelers team that's a lot more dangerous than they were late last year.
Yeah, I think what you're raising in that, what can they get to 7-4? Obviously, that'd be on a worse pace than they were a year ago. But I think the schedule's a little bit tougher as you look at some of those teams. There's a lot more toss-ups between, I think, Vikings, Packers, Colts, Chargers. You mentioned those. Those are all reasonably solid teams. So if you can beat a couple of them, lose to a couple of them, even if you're maybe behind last year's pace a little bit. Maybe you've seen the ball go through the hoop a little bit more when you get to the Lions and the Ravens late in the season. So we'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Chris, thanks for joining me this week. Always appreciated. Please travel safely to Dublin. That's where you'll be joining us next on the channel. So everyone, please subscribe for everything that our guys are going to be doing across the pond. We got some cool media opportunities this week that you don't normally get when the Steelers are stateside, and it's just stuff coming from the locker room. We're going to get as much of that to you as we can. So again, sign up to the channel. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Help us out in the YouTube algorithm. And please check us out at postgazette.com for all of our written coverage. Chris will be writing a fair amount from over there as well. So check that out, and we will talk to you again real soon.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.